the street. So there was like about 15 to 20 vehicles with those four-wheelers and the SUV trucks and the cars. They all came to take one person off of the street. They give me your identification card. That's unconstitutional. I don't have to give you my identification card. We're not in a military state. And so it's like the point of the example is that we're at a level where certain things are acceptable that go against rule of law, where if we're silent, we're in a problem. The Frankfurt School was a bunch of intellectuals in before Nazi Germany had emerged in different areas of study. They posed the question, will this society go against democratic principles and side with the rise of fascism, which was Hitler and company? And so once they made that move, once that political party took a hold, the Frankfurt School decided that the German society psychologically were at a point where they would support that injustice as a whole. So they left, and that's why now you have the New School for Social Research in New York, because that group of intellectuals migrated from that place to New York. But the point being is that, when the society, when everybody is just like, it's not bothering, it's not affecting me right now, enjoying the good and forbidding the evil, it's not my problem. You know what I'm saying? I had a neighbor who some young boys tried to break into her house. My neighbor. So we told the young boys, what are you doing? You're going, who are you? You're just walking in the house like it's your house. So I called the cops. My neighbor tells her son says, and who said to call the cops? To the level of, each one is concerned with what they want. And that was in the suburbs where you're paying high taxes or whatever. When I lived in the city, if you came on my block, everyone in the neighborhood would come out and say, what are you doing? Like, who are you? Even one time I would put out some bikes for the trash, and people would come and knock on the door. This is not a suburb. We didn't want to take your bike because this is your stuff, and so you have it backwards. The level of privacy or privacy in the suburban mentality is, I don't want to be bothered with you. And so how that has played out in the political sphere is, I don't want to be bothered with you, what's going on, that's your business. So enjoying the good, forbidding the evil in the context of this society is that we have to be involved. If we're not involved, everything, goes in the wrong way, whether we like it or not. We may not ourselves be involved, but those who are being involved take up the responsibility. We have to support them. And one of the most complicated things that we have right now is understanding how to navigate enjoining the good and forbidding the evil in a two-party system in which none of them completely agrees with our values as Muslims. We're just like in between, the halal and the haram and the haram. But still, what I'm saying, at this point in time, that we have that responsibility of being involved. And people, if we don't talk, we're in a jam. That's the reality. If we don't talk, if we're not involved, we're in a jam. And that's this. We saw that. We're seeing that everywhere. And if the Slovenian philosopher is right, Zizek, he's saying that now we're moving to fascio capitalism, if he's right, which is going to be about everybody making money, mashallah. And capitalism is no longer going to be associated with the democratic state, and we're seeing that everywhere. So make money at any cost. You know what I'm saying? Forget about individual rights, constitutional rights, forget about rule of law, government, whatever, environmental restraints, everything is out the door. Even if we're selling human beings, no problem. In Arizona, they just found the whole chop shop of human body parts. Human organs sold, children sold, everything is up for selling. That's why we say, if we don't have that, if we don't have that sense of enjoying the good, forbidding the evil, being out involved, having a voice, then what ends up happening is that we end up destroying ourselves. So the least of it, if we feel that we're so disempowered, don't oppose those who are trying, but the least of it is to hate what's going on in your heart, right? That has to be the case. We have to hate it in our hearts. We can't just say, oh, mashallah, brother, brother, please stop. You're just so negative, brother. No, we have to describe reality as it is, right? We describe the reality as it is, and then we ask, what is the solution? And we count the ni'mah of Allah. But positive thinking is not going to solve our problems. Just dreaming it away, I won't look over there, I'll just look. It's not going to solve our problems. No way. We do this with our children. We do this with our children. We see that they're having struggles. We keep pushing it away. And then when they get to a point when they collapse and they're really having serious issues, what do? We bring them to the masjid or we send them to the madrasa? Huh? Yeah. We send them to the madrasa. Right? After everything is said and done, we don't have any other, or we tried to bring in the youth coordinator. And we think it's going to solve the issue. It's not going to solve the issue. That's too late in the process. I want to emphasize this point, and I emphasize it over and over again, especially. We can't move without a jama'ah. We can't move without a community. We can't move without leadership. We can't move without education. We can't move without money. We can't move without zuhud. We can't move without iman. It's a package. The deen is a package. We won't be able to practice all of the deen, of course, it's according to ability. But we have to understand that the deen is a package. But, we emphasize highly that, where we're at now, the enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is extremely important. Extremely important. And we have to take the means. And part of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil in this time period, especially, we have to acknowledge that we may need mental health supports, right? To deal with our own situations, right? We may need that in the community, right? To root out some of the issues that we have. In other words, there's some things in the culture that we have to say, no, this is wrong in our culture. We have to change it. I'm one that's 100% pro-culture. Say, if you're Pakistani from this particular village, you celebrate that. If you're Indian from this particular place, you celebrate that. Your people, your history, your experience, your struggles, mashallah, that's nobody says that's eliminated in the deen except those that don't have common sense. Right? You can't destroy people's ties and their history and so on. But the deen comes and corrects and regulates and helps us. And the deen gives us that foundation. Right? But if there's something wrong in our culture, we have to admit it and we have to say this is wrong in our culture. We just don't support it, if it's wrong in the culture. And so that's part of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And there's certain things that are wrong in our culture. Alhamdulillah, there's good, but one of the things that we do, we silence the children. That's wrong. We can't do that. Another thing that we do, we don't give the sisters a proper place. Now we have to deal with the extreme. What's the extreme of that now? Women's only. Yeah. It's ridiculous to the opposite extreme. And then guess what? We have no conversations about it except debates. And most of those debates take place where? Outside of the community in some realm like cyberspace or whatever. We're not honest about it. And so remember we talked about the issue of balance. We're losing our balance. And part of this is because we don't dialogue. We're not rooting ourselves in knowledge. We're not applying the deen to the life situations that we're in, right? We're thinking that the zuhud is just a personal affair, right? It's just me and my piety. Don't bother me with anything else. We think that the deen is just restricted to salah and zakat and the masjid. We think we're not part of the society. For a long time, we went with that idea that this is a society of what? Is a society of kufr, those are not Muslims, that's not about. But now we're seeing that those issues are impacting us. We're involved in this society and so on and so forth. And so, we're going to end with, I'd rather be an activist than a politician. Why?
You keep your principle.
The activists, you can make coalitions with people, you can navigate, but the politicians, you're what? You're locked into having to deal with people regardless. You can't discriminate. That doesn't mean that the activist discriminates, but what it means is that, you know, with the activists, you don't have to be stuck in that what? That hard space. But it's messy. It's messy. And so part of that, our people are now moved into a new phase to engage. Where we disagree is how to engage it. You know, we're not clear on how to engage it. And again, it's messy. You know, it's messy. So some things, because we didn't get engaged early on enough, I'll give you an example, like defining the family. We never moved to make a coalition with any other group in this country with regard to defining the family. Another issue is like we never were involved in education, right? We never had activists that were involved in the realm of science. So all of those issues now we're confronting with how the children are taught in the school, our rights, you know, to practice in the school system, you know, the issues of, you know, our identity, all of that comes because we're not involved. You know, we can't practice this hadith if we're isolated.
We can take a break because Maghrib is in 4 minutes.
Okay. So we have 5 more hadith after this. 7 more hadith. So we finish like, you know, like
It's actually Maghrib's dance.
no, I know them, and but I'm saying like aiming for the. So we're at 35.
Alright, inshallah, we'll take a break there. We have Salat al-Maghrib in a couple of minutes. The adhan will be going off. So those of you who are online, inshallah, we'll be back in about 15 to 20 minutes, inshallah. So.
So we have 9 hadith.
We have, we're in 35, so we have 8 hadith. Right, and this 42 or this 43? Oh, this 42.
Oh, okay, I counted this. So. Let's see.
We're in a good pace. Basically, we have.
No, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What time do we have to enter?
So, we have until 10. Well, we usually start around 8:45 after prayer. So we usually have about an hour and 15 minutes. So if we can knock it out in an hour, and then just 15 minutes for certification. If you don't mind talking a little bit about like the importance of the ijaz and such.
Really?
That's working now? We're all learning something. We're all learning something. I always wondered about Amir must have fixed it.
I always wondered about that. How are you doing?
How are you?
How are you doing? You can say. How many of those things did you get?
Just one. There's a small one. There was bigger ones, but we're good to go. Alright, Bismillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. So we're continuing inshallah with our reading of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi rahimahullah. We are on hadith number 35, the sanctity of the Muslim. Bismillah. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تحاسدوا ولا تناجشوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا ولا يبع بعضكم على بيع بعض وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا المسلم أخو المسلم لا يظلمه ولا يخذله ولا يكذبه ولا يحقره التقوى ها هنا ويشير إلى صدره ثلاث مرات بحسب امرئ من الشر أن يحقر أخاه المسلم كل المسلم على المسلم حرام دمه وماله وعرضه رواه مسلم. Imam Nawawi says rahimahullah on the authority of Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, who said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, do not envy one another, and do not inflate prices for one another, and do not hate one another, and do not turn away from one another, and do not undercut one another in trade, but rather be slaves of Allah and brothers amongst yourselves. A Muslim is the brother of a Muslim. He does not oppress him, nor does he fail him, nor does he lie to him, nor does he hold him in contempt. Taqwa is right here, and he pointed to his chest 3 times. It is evil enough for a man to hold his brother Muslim in contempt. The whole of a Muslim is inviolable for another Muslim, his blood, his property, and his honor.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. So actually this hadith is quite difficult to deal with from the angle of this being, something that is missing in today's time. The issue of brotherhood. Here we see that is one of the qualities of what is one of the qualities of the Muslim. That the Muslim is the brother, and here bil ghalaba we say the brother, but it also means the sisters are in that sisterly relation to one another, and brothers are in that brotherly relation to one another. We have ayat of the Quran that talk about iman and ukhuwa. إنما المؤمنين إخوة. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in the Quran, with emphasis, pairs up brotherliness and brotherhood with belief, or iman, more properly said. Then you have the command of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, اتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ويتفرقوا. You have a positive command and a prohibition. The command is to hold to the Quran together, or to the Shahada. And then the prohibition is not to divide to the point of destruction. Hafiz ibn Rajab, when it came to the issue of the part of the hadith in which it says, do not hate each other, he says, لما كثر اختلاف الناس في مسائل الدين وكثر تفرقهم كثر بسبب ذلك تباغضوهم. Their hatred, and they're cursing each other came in the issues of how they deal with the deen. Me personally, I like to talk about social issues more than I like to talk about. I like to talk about application of the deen more than I like to talk about the deen directly, because for me the deen, for me, is my personal choice. But for me, the deen of Islam is a sacred space. I don't want to deal with differences of opinion. That's my sacred space. Don't bring all of that to me. I don't want to have. I think because one of the things that pushed me out of Christianity was when I was studying to be a priest. I had initially gone into study to be a priest because I was impacted by what was going on in the world. I felt that everything was kind of going in a negative direction. So I wanted to save my soul, and I was very focused on myself and my own spiritual growth. And even if that meant not getting married or just leaving society, whatever. And it was an attempt to spiritually, save myself. So then I came to a conclusion when I started to see issues that were going on in the society. I was like, what is the answer? What answers do we have as religious people toward this? This is like just telling us, like, you just have your own corner, you do your ibadah, and that's it. And when it starts affecting home, meaning your own community, your own people, and your own family, it becomes very personalized. And I wish that it would have been just left at that. But then when I started to see the whole issue, for instance, like before, like everything that's happening now that you see in the media, this was taking place internally within the Catholic Church like over 20 years ago. Do you call God he or not he? What's the role of women? What's the role of the LGBT? All of that was going on internally within those communities. But I began to see that one of the things, like for instance, in Ohio, in Painesville, Ohio, they used to have this church, and in that area, a lot of migrant workers would go to that church. And so part of the way that we were being educated was that it was not only an issue of getting like so-called scientific knowledge of religion and whatever field or specialization that you're in, but you also had to volunteer, similar to what we do in this program. And so part of the, because in this program we've been combining like community service and even like learning how to be activists and all that with studying the deen. And they did something similar to that. And then so I was tasked with going to visit a church that had a lot of migrant workers. And it was chaotic because similar to what you see is going on now, the system had opened up the door for all these migrant workers to come indirectly without saying it, so that you have cheap labor. And then they decided, during that Dole, remember when Dole was running for presidency and all of that, during that time, they had decided that, they wanted to shut down. So it was amazing to see that the same people in the same church wouldn't allow the other group to pray in the church. So the Mexicans specifically, they had to pray during the night time, and they couldn't leave any signs, because they have their images and all that they put up. And then and then sometimes even, like we would be in the act of ibadah together, and some people in the dua, they would make dua, and some people would say, "Oh God," and so God is He or whatever. So the other person, not He, God, in the middle of the ibadah, they're fighting over how to designate the name for God. And you saw that, you see that, and that was an issue that, anybody that had a difference of opinion, you just go start your own church. That has been the history within Christianity. And it's not to be offensive to the Christians, but it's a lesson for the Muslims. So, Imam Ibn Rajab, he's saying that, when we can't handle our differences on principle, this is one of the reasons why the scholars, they have a whole science of knowledge that's called ilm al-khilaf. Ilm al-khilaf. The science of just dealing. Why do we differ? Why are there differences? And so and not everybody's a khilafi, as they say. The khilafi is an expert in understanding why is it that this school has this opinion, that school has this opinion, where's the common ground between them, why they differ, where is it that they're irreconcilable, where is it that it's just a matter of difference of perspective versus a real difference. That's a science, and not all scholars, they study in that way. And so you find that the ulama, they took that serious because they took a hadith like this serious. They took the ayat of the Quran serious. They took the command to brotherhood serious. But we've reached a point now where it's like, we're different. So I try to keep my personal, when it comes to my deen, I don't bring that in. And I was taught by the ulama, we have the hadith 77 excuses. Always find an excuse for your brother. The ulama of Azhar, they always taught us, you try, even if you don't agree, see if there's something that supports it in the deen for what they do. Even if you don't agree with it, but see if it's supported, even if it's supported. But we reached the point, less the life of the human being. We didn't mention this in the hadith before with a lot of emphasis, but Imam an-Nawawi, when he talks about, loving for your brother what you love for yourself, and he talked about the rights of the neighbors, he talks about that includes the non-Muslims as well. We live in a time period where it's like, it's like whether it's your co-religionist or you're the person that you're in the same society with, everybody is at war with each other, right? So Hafidh ibn Rajab, he says that this is what basically, led to a lot of destruction, especially people not being clear on how to deal with their deen, right? That led to a lot of divisions. In some cities in this country, the multiplicity of masajid, and even Sheikh Walid al-Manisi, Walaikum salam, Sheikh Walid al-Manisi, Yusuf, take him downstairs for the take that guy downstairs to the musalla. So what were we saying? Sheikh Walid al-Manisi, he's the head of the Islamic University of Minnesota. One of the things that is attributed to him, he said that the sunnah of the Muslims here, when it comes to developing the community, is differences of opinion. Why? Because this one masjid has differences internally. What do? They break off. They go create another masjid. And another masjid. And not that, is all bad. That's possibly the way that Allah Ta'ala is spreading the deen. But there's sometimes when you look at it, we're taught in the deen also, don't differ over certain issues, or you weaken yourself. You weaken the community, and then you don't have the ability to make any moves or move forward on anything. And so the issue comes back down to, like some masajid, based on ignorance, like in one of the cities, I won't mention it because of the dignity of the name of the city, preserve the Muslims, but they broke, a masjid broke just because, for instance, the way that they prayed the salah. Or they broke over an argument over where the women should be. It was just one issue in deen, they didn't agree on it, and they fought over it, and they ended up creating a whole other community. And Hafidh ibn Rajab here is mentioning that issue, and under this hadith, that that the increase of the different sects, so to speak, this comes from the issue of hating one another, right? And the Messenger of Allah, this hadith, you can't deny the soundness of it. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is saying, that one of the qualities of the Muslim is brotherliness, right? We don't oppress each other, right? And this is what we do. As a community, like even now, I have a difficult thing. I have a difficult time on a personal level, not to bring my own politics. But the Muslims will raid a country like Yemen. It creates an international humanitarian disaster that pretty much we can't handle, right? And it's like no one says anything about it in a concerted effort. We're talking about human life. At least somewhere along the point, there shouldn't be a compromise, a political exit solution. Human life is not worth that. This is what we had. This is what we were saying about the weighing of harm and benefit. Human life is not worth some negotiation that we come to the table, and we say the human life is sacred. We don't agree. We come to some determination. 2 masjid stories. And this is when we look at this hadith and where we're at in our lives. One of the brothers took an hour and a half to explain to me a difference of opinion that took place internally in a board of a masjid, and it included an imam. May Allah forgive him. We wasted as a community $500,000 in lawsuits, right? Between the two communities' money. And the same situation took place in 2-3 other cities. Same people, And so it's like we're at a point where this hadith, it's like let's not be with our heads in the clouds. The hadith is telling us, right? Do not envy one another. We do that in families. The report. Well, how did you move to the suburb? We didn't move to the suburb. How did you get that house? We don't have that house. You see what I'm saying? It brings tears to the eyes. Say mashallah. At least they're not in your situation. They're in a better situation than you, right? What's the necessity of the hasad? Within a family. We're not even talking about a family and outside of a family. We're talking about blood members, families. They have rights over each other that, you have a combination of the ukhuwat fil iman wa ukhuwat fil nasab, that you have brotherhood and iman and brotherhood in blood relation. That's the best relationship. Those who convert to Islam, we know we don't have that, the brotherhood in iman with our own families. And we have some Muslim families, they have both combined, and they have hasad for each other. And dawah organizations do that. They see one group is progressing, they have hasad on them, and they make sure that they stain and they destroy. You have imams doing that. You have sisters doing that with each other. They do that with each other. So the issue of envy, then the issue of bidding against each other. Wallahi, one of the brothers was telling me that, he was telling me, he asked me to make a khutbah. He was like, our brothers, they have businesses, cell phone businesses or whatever. They will make sure that they compete with each other to destroy each other. Right? To take each other out. And so they even, they bid against each other in that regard. What do we do? It says, okay, do not hate each other. And he said, Hafidh ibn Rajab mentioned that point, that the hating each other is what is leading to a lot of the differences of opinion. Look, the deen of Islam is not a mess. Islam is not a mess. The knowledge of Islam is not a mess. It's the people that are a mess. And we shouldn't get to the point now where we have the same excuse that every other religion has. Well, our religion is this way, but human beings. No, that doesn't work. Because the deen is supposed to be there for us to help each other grow and develop so that we're different people. We're supposed to try to be the people that are the model people in the dunya. It's not just so that we make an excuse for ourselves. And that's not, I'm not saying that from a platform of arrogance. I have my own issues. But what I'm saying is that we have to strive to be at that other level. We can't just say, well, okay, the Muslims, you don't represent Islam. Sorry, you have your deficiencies, but this is Islam. And this, no. Or else that's just Islam in the books. It's not Islam in the practice of the people. Islam mujass. It's not in the is lived out. It's not lived out. Imam an-Nawawi says, and do not turn your backs on each other, means let none of you give up on his brother, even if he sees him turning, right, his back on him. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it is not permitted for a Muslim to forsake his brother for more than 3 nights, so that they meet, and this one turns away, and this one turns away. The best of the two is the one that greets first. We have that. We have family members in the same city. They won't salam each other, won't look for each other. We have people that are struggling in their deen. We have youth struggling in the deen. The community, they figured that out. They don't want the person to be a contaminant. They push them to the side. And then he says, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, and let none of you sell upon the sale of another. Right? And don't, the form of the sale upon the sale of a brother is that his brother should sell something, and he should tell the purchaser to annul the sale, to stop the sale, so that he can sell him the like of it or something better for less than the price or whatever. And there was like a mention of raising the prices. We do that. This is one of the tragedies. We see that. I hear the stories in some places where there's a fitna, and the people, there's a tragedy comes, and what do the business people do? They raise the prices in the time of the tragedy versus, making it easy for the people. Water, bread, things that, people need to live off. Same thing, we have the problem, gas. It goes up to $4 or $5, a gallon. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is teaching us that, these things are not, right, they don't build brotherhood. If we want to understand how to fix the ummah, the hadith tells us how to fix the ummah. Not to have hasad with each other. Right? Not to bid against each other. It means, Najash means originally to raise and increase the price. And it is that someone increases the price of an article by entering the bidding because of jealousy. How many, sometimes when it comes to buying buildings, we do that. Or houses, we do that. We hear that almost like it's a common practice in different places. A particular person knows this group is going to buy the building. What do? They enter the sale, or they try to figure out how to outbid the person or jack up the price. Those types of things are extremely problematic. So you see here that it's not only an issue of adab. It's not only an issue of, mashallah, akhi, how are you doing? How's your family doing? Good to see you, brother. And then in the business transaction, is hell on earth. It's like I'm not even dealing with the human being. I forgot the face. I forgot the brother, mashallah, the barakah of Allah, that is completely gone. So he is, especially in the business transactions, right? And then there's the issue, a Muslim is the brother of a Muslim. He does not wrong him, fail to assist him. Some people take advantage, no doubt. But that's why we have social services, as well. Some people, we have to determine some people take advantage, right? But he doesn't lie to him or despise him, right? And so they pointed to the issue of taqwa, or establishing the deen. It comes back to the issue of the heart. You have another translation that's there, right? Read that.
Taqwa is right here.
No, before that. Does not humiliate.
So a Muslim is the brother of a Muslim. He does not oppress him, nor does he fail him, nor does he lie to him, nor does he hold him in contempt.
That's a little more detailed. So that, the issue of having hatred for one another, we already mentioned that, is unfortunate, but this is what has led to, a lot of destruction. And then here, one of the things that we, unfortunately, we've gotten to a point where the people even praise Hajjaj bin Yusuf. Hajjaj bin Yusuf, he left to his benefit some things like markings in the Quran. But Hajjaj bin Yusuf had a reputation for, being the type of leader that was harsh with the people. And so when we look at these things too, when we talk about, government, the issue of government, these are the values. These are the values in the government, an economy which is not oppressive, an economy which is not a monopoly, which seeks to monopolize so that I can raise the prices and control. Like, what was the guy who did that? It was from the pharmaceutical company. He raised what was it, HIV medicine, was it?
No, I think it was what's it called? EpiPen. Yeah.
The EpiPen, what was the price? Huh? 3,000. So what was the initial price?
It was like $5. I know I'm just exaggerating now.
What is it? A lower price, and then he what? To what price?
Like something really.
Yeah, like two. Yeah, there was a couple thousand more. I think it was even more than that. But this is what the hadith is saying. This is what the hadith is saying. That is prohibited. What does Walmart do when it comes into the neighborhood?
Destroy the mom and pop shops.
It destroys the economy all around it, and it stays with what? Huh? What did you say? What? Well, it does in some cases, but what they have been doing recently is jacking the price, because I can't tell the difference between Walmart and the other place. It's just as expensive with lower quality stuff. But it comes into the environment by studies and research. It demolishes, the businesses of everyone else. So from here we can take values, even though, this is talking about values of the Muslim community. Do we want those types of businesses in the environment that just come and take out, other businesses, and you take their means, of supporting themselves and so on and so forth? What about a political leader telling the people to go back home? The issue of holding people in contempt. You know what I'm saying? We, as Muslims, we have some sort of means to judge by. So all of, like, for instance, this hadith is focusing on the issue of brotherliness, but from it we can take rules for even what does that mean, brotherliness in the society, or some general rules. And we see that a lot of those things, all of these rules are being violated right now, right? Failing to assist people, right? Despising people, right? This is the ainul mushkila fil unsuriyya, is the problem when it comes, the core of the issue when it comes to racism. Despising people, especially because of how they may look or their origin or whatever. But at the end of the day, for us, all of a Muslim is sacred for a Muslim. The blood of the Muslim, the property of the Muslim, and the honor of the Muslim. Right? And this is why Imam al-Qarafi, rahimahullah, he pushed hard. He said that, look, one of the objectives of the Sharia is the preservation of human dignity. Hifd al-ird. Some of the other ulama, they felt as though, side issue, but that's not. No, this is a core issue. I had one of the mashaykh that I studied with, we talked about that. I had told them, I said, look, Imam al-Qarafi, the scholars, they debate with Imam al-Qarafi on that, and they say that that's not one of the major objectives. He said, oh yeah, it's not one of the major objectives. Look at the dunya today and what everybody in the dunya is looking for. They're looking for a sense of honor and dignity, right? And for that to be respected and regarded. And so here the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a succinct way, he's telling us what these are the qualities of a Muslim. When in doubt, he return back to these qualities. Right? Adam and Sifat al-Shakhsiyat al-Muslimah. This is from the characteristics of the Muslim personality. And then this is the issue that's tied back into, when we talk about purification of the heart. Taqwa was here, and he pointed to his breast with his hand 3 times. Right? That this all starts here. It all starts, the way that we deal with each other, it starts in the heart. And so things like envy, that kills the heart. Despising people, that kills the heart. Lying, it kills the heart. Right? And then, there's some things too that come back here. Like, for instance, apathy. He said, right here, it says, the Muslim is the brother of a Muslim, he does not wrong him, fail to assist him. Right? And so this is, one of the things that we have to look at, especially those, the principle we want to end on this and move on to the next hadith. The principle of no man left behind? What's that principle?
No man left behind.
Well, here is the issue, failing to assist the people. No Muslim left behind.
No kid left behind.
Yeah.
The school,
Yeah.
education, no
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah. It's the similar concept. If we want to empower ourselves, that's how we have to be thinking, right? We think in the big picture and the local picture, but we have to think overall, from the angle of, who are the most weak in the community, what's going on, and not leave people left behind. Okay. The hadith that comes after just reinforces that concept, but it talks about the condition of the heart. Is a lot more what? Compassionate. So let's go.
عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: من نفس عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا نفس الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة. ومن يسر على معسر يسر الله عليه في الدنيا والآخرة. ومن ستر مسلما ستره الله في الدنيا والآخرة. والله في عون العبد ما كان العبد في عون أخيه. ومن سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له به طريقا إلى الجنة. وما اجتمع قوم في بيت من بيوت الله يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه بينهم إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة وحفتهم الملائكة وذكرهم الله في من عنده. ومن أبطأ به عمله لم يسرع به نسبه. رواه مسلم بهذا اللفظ. Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah, on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever removes a worldly grief from a believer, Allah will remove from him one of the griefs of the day of Akhirah, the day of resurrection. And whoever alleviates the need of a needy person, Allah will alleviate his need in this world and the hereafter. Whoever shields a Muslim, Allah will shield him in this world and the hereafter. And Allah will aid his slave so long as he aids his brother. And whoever follows a path to seek knowledge therein, Allah will make easy for him a path to paradise. No people gathered together in one of the houses of Allah, reciting the book of Allah and studying it among themselves, except that sakina, tranquility, descends upon them, and mercy envelopes them, and the angels surround them. And Allah mentions them amongst those who are with Him. And whoever is slowed down by his actions will not be hastened forward by his lineage. Related by Muslim in these words.
So what what's the phrase that symbolizes Salman? What's the phrase that symbolizes ILF?
Using knowledge and service?
Yeah, this hadith is like the proof of that, from the angle of knowledge and service, but it ties into the issue that Iman, is at the core of that, right? There's some studies that have been released with regard to depression, and in those studies, one of the things that's mentioned with regard to depression is the lack of what? Purpose is like that's more of an existential issue. That's more of an Imani crisis. What else? The issue of brotherhood, the issue of people being connected. A lot of times, the lack of connection with people, being able to talk to people, so on and so on. I don't know if any of you know the history of social services in this country. Social services actually began in this country based on, sometimes in some neighborhoods, you have a division that comes from the city to take animal abuse. They pick up stray animals. It came from, basically that department. And one of the things that they had noticed was that if an animal is abused in a particular household or whatever, that's a sign that something may be going on inside as well. But it started with that concern for animals. And then what do we have? What do we have? What do we have regarding animals in Islam? Wasn't there a lady that was promised Jannah for what? For abusing the animal?
Giving water to the dog.
For being compassionate to the animal. But the social services, basically initially, it had started like that. But if you look at the history, a lot of it, who was the social worker? Usually the social worker was that, like Kabir al-Qawm, the person in the neighborhood who was kind of the leader or whatever, would go and deal with people's issues. The auntie who she knew something was going on and she would go visit this person. That was the core of the socials. In other words, people that care, society that's concerned, right? And so, unfortunately, it has come to a point where some of this stuff, when it comes to the issue of like counseling, it's unfortunate, but like one of the sisters was mentioning, she was having some issues in the family, and she says, I sent my daughter to a counselor, and the counselor told her, Muslim counselor, may Allah forgive her, and she tells her, I can't help your daughter with iman. I can't help her with her iman. So I asked the sister, I said, why? Because of like liability issues or whatever. So yeah, some of the counselors, they like to have a strict division between professionality and my religious beliefs. The reason why I mention this is because a lot of people, when we start talking about the issue of anxiety and what people go through, a lot of times they need someone they need to feel like they're listened to. You need to have that. And that in the depression studies, it comes into, if you're talking to someone and you feel not understood, you go to this person, you feel not understood. You go to that person, you feel not understood. How do you think you're going to feel about yourself? Huh? Yeah, nobody understands me. And the more you plunge into that, nobody understands me, it gets problematic if it goes the wrong way. And so, sometimes the way that things have gone now is that the whole science of listening to people and helping them work through their problems, that has become a dollar sign to it. After 45 minutes, sorry, your time is up. See you next week. And then if I have a broken family, or if, I'm having problems in my relationship, or if I can't tell my family, if I'm from a culture in which we don't talk about these things and I'm going to this person because I'm having confidence, I still feel trapped. So the issue here is like, that we, part of this really empowering the community, they have something that's called like bystander training. And the bystander training is that we learn how to train our eyes to see if someone is having a difficulty, right? We should anticipate the issue, the problems of our Muslim brothers and sisters before they happen. You can tell some people, you look, what's going on with you? If we know each other well enough, you see that. And so that's what alleviating the Muslim, alleviating the hardships of the Muslim. This is true tasawwuf. Not sitting in a corner with the dhikr beads, and then you want your own perfection. You should make your dhikr. You should sit in the corner with the dhikr beads and the adhkar inside it. But if that's what you're doing and you think that being with the people and not alleviating the issues, if you think that that's a problem and what you're doing is grander, that's going against what the Sunnah is saying. Spending that time with the people, alleviating their concerns and their issues, it becomes important, right? And so it says, whoever makes it easy for someone in difficulty, Allah will make it easy for him. What do we do a lot of times? We're looking for a dua mustajaba, right? We're looking for that dua that's answered by Allah. And here we're being told, okay, service the people, and Allah will make it easy for you, right? Go service the people, Allah will make it easy for you. This is not only what benefits you yourself, is good selfishness, but it benefits others. And there's some things like, whoever conceals the wrong action of a Muslim, there's some things that we, are not necessary to talk about in the community. You can let it go. But there's other things which are detrimental. If you have somebody in the community and they're a sexual predator, you don't conceal that from the rest of the community, so the person is just running around, right? That person needs help. They need to figure out how to deal with themselves. But that's not covered by this hadith in that sense. That person is a danger to the community. right? When you start harming other people, is a danger now. You know, there's a difference between sins that are between you and Allah and sins that violate the sanctity of the community. The same thing with a person that, you know, they have a bad reputation as far as being trustworthy in contracts and all of that. You can't just put that person in charge of, you know, masjid funds or whatever, that, community funds. It doesn't work like that, you know. Allah will be of assistance to the slave as long as you're in assistance to your brothers. Right? And so, another thing here is mentioning that the reality of the book of Allah, you know, not just memorizing the book of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, but studying it together and teaching it, especially in the houses of Allah, how that brings down sakina. So from one angle, the hadith is telling us about these anxieties in the dunya, right, and the hardships that come. And then from another angle, Allah is telling us, or the Prophet of Allah is telling us, that the book of Allah brings down sakina and how it is that we can facilitate for ourselves the hardships. Okay, listen. You can read the other hadith in in English.
Imam Nawawi says, Rahimahullah, on the authority of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for what he has related from his Lord. Verily, Allah Ta'ala has written down the good deeds and the evil deeds, and then it explained it by saying, whosoever intended to perform a good deed but did not do it, then Allah writes it down with himself as a complete deed. And if he intended to perform it and then did perform it, then Allah writes it down with himself as from 10 good deeds up to 700 times, up to many times multiplied. And if he intended to perform an evil deed but it did not do it, then Allah writes it down for him as a completed good deed. And if he intended the evil deed, and then performed it, then Allah writes down just one evil deed.
So here is showing the life of the heart, right? How the intention goes back to the issue of the intention. You know, the book starts off with talking about the intention, and you know, there's many hadith which have indicated to the state of the heart. But one of the things is, like, you know, having a lot of good intentions as a way to multiply our deeds, but also not just to multiply our deeds, to keep the health of our heart going, right? And I think when we look at the reality of life and the things that happen in the dunya, some of them are very hard to deal with. You know, just don't stay stuck there. Don't stay stuck at, oh my God, look at the state of the world. But intend, if I had the ability to do something to change the situation, right? That makes you feel empowered. But also doesn't make you only feel empowered. There's reward that comes with it. There's reward that comes with it. And sometimes you don't know because of your intention, even if you're not in that capacity of doing something, because of your intention, you know, and you're concerned, maybe someone else is, and maybe that person may be the one that can do it. But because you intend it, you know, and you show that concern. We had a brother from Yemen with us. He used to teach in, subhanAllah, it was in Michigan, Sheikh Hamoud. He ended up going into the parliament in Yemen before all of this fitna. But he was always a busy brother, always busy, Sheikh. He was busy. Even sometimes it was like overwhelming because we're like in the dars in the middle of the class and his phone is ringing. Oh, sorry, hold on, brothers. I have to, you know, I have to take this call. And then he said, you know, if I don't make this effort, you know, then they stay without the people, you know, they're depending upon me. And the reason of saying, you know, the reason for mentioning that is that sometimes we don't know who's in our circle. We've had many experiences, especially in the U.S. with that. Brothers and sisters that come into the community, they end up in high-ranking positions all over the world. CEO of a corporation, you know, they go in city government or, you know, in the country or this or that, or, you know, the international law, whatever. Our community has a lot of that. And in the environment, when we intend and we start talking in that way, we're giving ideas out. So the more that we have, you know, this good intention, we're spreading that in the community, we're actually reorganizing the community. Because an intention is a maqsid. The intention is an objective that we're thinking about reaching, right? So some things we may not be able to handle, but somebody else can handle. Someone can bring in what? the means by which to do it. Even though we may not be able to do it, someone can. And we find that over and over again, right? And so having that heart which intends, is very important. Other than that, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is showing us that, goodness is rewarded. We already covered that when we were talking about the issue of qadr. That even if you look here, just with no action, just with intention and iman, there's reward that comes. And look at the just nature of Allah and the generous nature of Allah. This hadith actually is a deep hadith in Aqidah, because it's telling us how much Allah rewards us for different things, even if there's no action. And then Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala tells us, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is being described as rewarding us for what? For even that action, that we do, and it has nothing to account. I mean, even that thing that we intend, it has no action. And then if we do a wrong action, it's just accounted to us as one wrong action. Or if we intend what? A wrong thing is only accounted as what? One. But look at when we start talking about intending good things, and look at when we start doing good things like Ramadan. How is Ramadan? Ramadan is that environment in which what? Reward is multiplied for it. Every action that we do that's good, right? But here is talking also about what's going on in our hearts.
Imam Nawawi says, Rahimahullah, on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, who said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, verily Allah Ta'ala has said, whosoever shows enmity to a wali, a friend of mine, then I have declared war against him. And my servant does not draw near to me with anything more love to me than the religious duties I have obligated upon him. And my servants continue to draw near to me with nafil, supererogatory or deeds, until I love him. When I love him, I am his earring from which he hears, and his sight in which he sees, and his hand in which he strikes, and his foot in which he walks. Were he to ask something of me, I would surely give it to him. And were he to seek refuge with me, I would surely grant him refuge.
So here, if when we start talking about, we talked about this a little earlier, that the issue of the dua mustajaba, we want to come close to Allah, we want acceptance from Allah. What's the pathway? From this hadith, what's the pathway?
Action.
Huh? But there's something specific in the hadith. Yes. The obligations become the priority. Right? Sometimes when we have issues in our life, the best review is like, what's my condition in the salah? Where I'm at with the arkan of the deen. Right? With the basics of the deen. And then from there, we said that, we mentioned iman increases and decreases with deeds. If they're good deeds, they increase. We even mentioned, the other hadith just mentioned the issue of intending good deeds, how we get rewarded, so on and so forth. But the basics is that the foundation of Islam, or the arkan of Islam, or even the basics of Islam, right, is what is how we come close to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. My slave does not draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than that which I have made obligatory upon him. This kills superstition. We mentioned that before. Right? Sure, there's situations that, man, we're in a bad, we don't know where to turn. We know that our iman is weak. We don't know where to turn. But unfortunately, what you see sometimes in the Muslim community is a quiet despair. There's a quiet despair sometimes. Like we mentioned that example, the issue of the kind of like a mahkamatul awliya. You find, like we mentioned that about Egypt, that people, when they come to a point where they don't know where to turn, they'll go and they'll put dua in a particular grave, in another grave, mostly the graves of Ahl al-Bayt, or what's attributed to the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's the level of despair that a lot of us have reached. That is like, we're just looking for aid or support. But here the deen is turning us and say, look, we want aid and support. We do what? We begin with what?
The obligations.
We begin with establishing the obligation. And then what?
And then continue with
And
the
then
knowledge.
increase is a sulm, right? The nawafil after the fara'id, after the obligations, with that which is obligatory in the deen, everything which is recommended, it becomes a ladder to take us more and more. Remember we talked about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with Aisha radiallahu anha, in her questioning of the Prophet with regard to his ibadah. What did he say?
Should I not be an abd and shukur?
Yeah. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually gave us a living example of this hadith. Right? He had protection from Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. He had a dua that was accepted. Sure, we don't have wahi in the same way that he had, but we have wahi in the form of the Quran and even the Sunnah. La yantiq an al-hawa. That's what the ulama, many of them say. You know, that the Sunnah, as long as we can establish that the ahadith are sound, then they represent part of revelation as well, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't speak from his own desire when it came to matters of the deen. He was, guided and protected from error. And so this is a good way for personal development, right? We want to talk about personal spiritual development, do it yourself, so to speak. No sheikh, no complexity. Here's it. You exercise the fara'id. You increase your ibadah little by little. Some people say, how can I get close to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala? Here it tells us. We get close to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala by learning how to have that regimen. Learning how to implement the obligations, doing a little extra here, a little extra there with that intention. But here, the beauty of this hadith, wallahi, from the angle of Aqidah, is that look at the language is the most beautiful. My slave continues to draw closer with the nawafil, right? Or those things which are extra, or those things which are above the obligation, until I love him, right? يتقرب إلي بالنوافل حتى أحبه, right? And so that's the beautiful thing of the hadith, like this, the hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi, what's the difference between hadith Qudsi and the Quran?
The Quran is recited and the Hadith Qudsi is not recited.
Yeah, what else?
And it's the Hadith Qudsi is through the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Quran is Allah's word.
Right, that's the scientific difference. And so here the hadith Qudsi, the beautiful thing about it, mostly always it gives you this awesome opinion of Allah. It's just an awesome opinion of Allah. Hadith Qudsi, that's what we should teach the children, Aqidah. Sure that, you have academic teachings in Aqidah, like Aqidah Tahawiyya and Wasatiyya and all that, but that's not going to move your heart. That's all intellectual debates about this group and that group, and what we believe in reference to this group and this group. And that's the academics. But the Hadith Qudsi, like this one, what do you feel about Allah? Read the Hadith. Oh, read the Hadith. Read it.
Whosoever shows enmity to a friend of mine, then I have declared war against him, and my servant does not draw near to me with anything more love to me than the religious duties I have obligated upon him. And my servant continues to draw near to me with nafil deeds until I love him. When I love him, I am his hearing with which he hears, and his sight with which he sees, and his hand with which he strikes, and his foot with which he walks. Were he to ask something of me, I would surely give it to him, and were he to seek refuge with me, I would surely grant him refuge.
So how do you understand Allah from the Hadith? Just do what I want you to do or I'll punish you. Is it like that? How do you understand it?
So he starts you off slowly, so he starts with this nafil.
Huh?
He starts you off slowly,
Mhm.
so it's just nafil.
Yeah, you're focusing on what Allah is asking you to do. But what is your opinion of Allah from the Hadith?
It kind of shows his mercy because he doesn't expect too much out of you in the beginning, and then as you progress in your iman, then go to Nafal and then
So is Allah against you?
No.
What? Allah is for you? What?
like he doesn't want anything too difficult. Like it's like Allah doesn't put anything which you can't handle. Or something like that.
Does Allah love you?
Mhm.
From the Hadith, do you get that understanding? I want you to focus on that. My slave continues to draw closer with optional acts until I love him. Right? When I love him, I am his hearing with which he hears, his sight with which he sees, his hand with which he grasps, and his foot with which he walks. If he asks me, I will definitely give to him. Right? It's like unlimited generosity. Ask. Ask. We have that as a principle in the deen, that every dua is heard by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. You may get it in this dunya, or maybe in the hereafter, or Allah may replace it with something else. You know what you ask, something that's more beneficial. But every dua, we have that as a principle, is heard. But I want you to focus on that. That it's not just a, do this, don't do that. That's important, but there's a discipline aspect of that. There's some rules, but here mostly, is the whole of the deen is saying that this is your love relationship with Allah. But one thing, let's remember this. Here it says, if he asks me, I will definitely give him. When we're looking for a dua to be accepted, what are the conditions from this hadith? Yeah. Exert ourselves. But you know what? That's the framework. But sometimes we don't have anywhere to turn. Sometimes we're so short on our deeds. We go through salah so fast, don't pay attention. Didn't do any extra ibadah. But still, even with that, mal asbab, bila asbab, did the asbab, with the causes, against them, or with no causes, Allah can change the condition of anyone. Period. Remember the man who killed the 99 men. Didn't at the end the angels rooted for the guy? He took that step towards Allah. The angels rooted for the person. Right? We have to have that conception of Allah. Shaitan puts that despair in our hearts regarding our sins, or regarding even the purpose of the dunya, or even the deen. Sometimes it is like Fajr, oh my God, Isha at the end of the day, it becomes like the deen is but when you see it in this light, is what sense do you get out of your religion? It's just obligations put upon you.
It's the love of Allah.
Don't just repeat what I said, dude. I'm joking with you.
What I take from this, if you don't want me to repeat what you said, is that when Allah Ta'ala gives us obligations, it's out of love for us. It's not out of just He wants to just do it for us, this is entertainment, like as some atheists or people may say.
Right.
It's because Allah Ta'ala, this is the means of attaining Allah's love.
Right. It's a love relationship between ourselves and Allah. And we have to realize, that the Prophet Muhammad was sent because Allah loves us. That's important to understand. And there's no sin that's committed. That doesn't mean that we just go have a party with sin, na'udhu billah. But there's no sin that's committed that separates us from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala absolutely. In the sense that Allah still is, the door of tawbah is open for us in that regard. And then we've seen the abwab al-khair, so many different ways to do good deeds, even if it's just sitting there. I intend to help the people of Yemen, inshallah, ya Allah. I intend to help the people of Syria, ya Allah. I intend to be a good person for the rest of it. I'm serious. You just sit there intending. You just sit there intending. All good. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, I want to, for the rest of my life, pray tahajjud. I want more children, for all of them to be Muslims, so that there's more. Sit there and you intend, even if it's just at the level of intention. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is saying there's reward for that. What we want to get is that good opinion of Allah, that good opinion, and we want to share that So that is, it's something that we share that in the ummah, that there's, that happiness, that good opinion of Iman, right? Not just like, well, we just believe in Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala as one. You don't believe in Allah, you're going to hell. You have to say the Shahada or you're going to hell. That's fine. But that doesn't do anything for my heart. That doesn't move me. You know what I'm saying? If I went to that khutbah, I will fall asleep too. You know what I'm saying? Or I would leave like, wow, what the heck? You know what I'm saying? These people, life is terrible. Life is just terrible. It's just, I have problems already. I can't pay my bills. You know what I'm saying? I don't have the money that's necessary to do. I have this going on. I have my mom. I have this. And then I have to go to the masjid and be beat up by the imam too. You know what I'm saying? It's like it doesn't work. And the people, the feedback. What was the extreme in this country that happened with the hell issue? The preachers, everything was hell, 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 hell. Then the people started rejecting, so then everything became Jannah, 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 Jannah. And then what? Oh, don't worry about it. God loves you and that's it. Yeah, whatever. In other words, there's no balance. So we as a Muslim community, we have to find that balance. We don't talk about love enough. Right? We got the whole part of the Jannah, the Jahannam part. We got that already. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to take that and throw it out like a lot of the religions did, in this country. But we have to have that balance. But definitely, especially if we're in da'wah, abshir, we have to give the good tidings. Abshiru, wala tanaffaru, right? Don't push the people away. And we do that. We push the people away.
Sheikh, is this hadith giving us the definition of who a wali is?
Yes, the wali, that's another issue. That, for instance, here when you go into the ta'liqat, it says that the root of the sense, the root has the sense of closeness and friendship and protection, as well as giving rise to the words to do with governance. So the wilaya, issue of wilaya in the political sense is tied into wilaya in the spiritual sense. Even the Shia, they have wilayatul faqih concept. Khomeini came up with that idea that you have the guardian of the society, which is the ulama, the institution of the ulama. To be honest with you, Saudi Arabia was built on that. They took it from Ibn Taymiyyah, from the angle of Ibn Taymiyyah thought that the society is built on two pillars, the rulers and the ulama, right? So those are the two people, the two cores. So in any event, Imam al-Shafi'i, he said that the wali, is the people of knowledge, not necessarily people of knowledge like scholars, but the people that implement their knowledge, right? And that's the Quranic definition. We've gotten into personality cults in the ummah. You know what the personality cults are? Cults, personalities. That, we sometimes over exaggerate. I personally am not comfortable with it, to be honest with you, because I came out of that type of religion in Catholicism, where this person is a wali, that person is a wali, that person is a wali. It's so many. Then we build masajid, devoted to this wali. Okay, that's fine. You have a person that's pious and we love them for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. But here is something much more simple. It could be your grandfather, the one who never missed salah ever. He gave sadaqah. He had patience with your grandmother, even though her biryani was burnt. That's no, just the average person. The average person. Sometimes they talked about in the past, a lot of the Aqidah scholars, that we wish we had the faith of our grandmothers. You heard that before? We wish we had the faith of our grandmothers. The faith of the grandmother? Man, she's the one that makes dua and the whole dunya flips. Don't worry, Allah has us. We hardship, the bombs dropping off and we don't have any food. Don't worry, Allah has us, mashallah. And she's smiling and Allah tabarak. It's like some old people are like that. They have sabat. They're stable and constant in their iman. We don't want to get too out there sometimes, because people, they say the wali is this person and that person and so on and so forth. But here is giving an indication that the one who's the wali is the one that's implementing the deen. That's another issue that came up when we talked about some of the deviations in Sufism. Maulana Thanawi rahmatullahi alayhi, who was one of the big scholars in India. He was a reformer, tasawwuf. Famous in Jamaat Tabligh. Actually, Jamaat Tabligh relies on him a lot. They take a lot of spiritual guidance from his teachings. But he said, we tried to reform in tasawwuf and still we didn't eliminate all the bid'ah. Right? And so here the concept of the wali is not that type of idea. The idea here is the one who's implementing the deen, that protection comes to you from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala from the implementation of the deen. And that's actually what they teach. For every sunnah that you practice, you gain protection from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Because the deen itself is a protection. Right.
Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah, on the authority of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, verily Allah has pardoned or has been lenient with, for me, my ummah, their mistakes, their forgetfulness, and that which they have been forced to do under duress.
Right, and there's a hadith. Again, it shows the rahmah of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Right, like in salah, if you miss something in salah, do you throw out the whole salah? You don't throw out the whole of the salah. You correct the part, if you miss something, you add on to it, or if you exceed it over, you make amends for it. So the issue of forgetfulness and the fast of Ramadan, the general practice is that, say for instance, if you forgot you're fasting and you eat a little something, is your fast invalidated? Right? That's the general practice amongst the ulama. Some go against that, but the general practice, how they understand the hadith, is that it's not a violation. There's forgetfulness. There's things that are done from mistakes and so on and so forth. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, facilitates. But even the issue, I think, which is most important in this time period, with a lot of issues, is like, for instance, this issue of, being forced to do things, right? The ikrar, right? The being forced to do things. They're here under pressure and this and that. Some people, we have to realize that. I think sometimes some of us, especially those who deal with knowledge, we have to be careful when it comes to the issue, especially of divorce, because we don't want to open up the issue of just giving everybody an excuse for a talaq that they pronounce. But contemporary psychology does teach us that there's pressure points that people have in which, they lose it psychologically in ways that were not there before. And so sometimes, under life pressures, people break, they do certain things, they say certain things. Domestic violence is like that too. We're not, we don't support domestic violence. But sometimes, we have to be careful with the issue of domestic violence, that we don't look at certain people as just monsters completely. That sometimes, people are under different pressures from different things. Did I ever tell you the story about my grandparents? My grandparents, after 50 years of marriage, they ended up splitting up. And then my family brought them back together, mostly because my aunt took care of them. I have an aunt who's a retired nurse. And so she ended up taking care of my grandparents. But my grandparents, they used to fight on a constant basis towards the later life. Part of the issue was my grandfather was always out of the house. So my grandmother was the queen, the king, the government of the house. It was how she wanted it to be. You know what I'm saying? So when he retired, what happens? Who rules the house? She rules the house. She rules the kitchen. She rules this. So my grandfather used to like, I want to cook my own food. If I want to go in the kitchen at 10 o'clock, and if I want to make my own breakfast, I want to do it. What's the issue? My grandmother was like, but the kitchen is going to be my way, my kitchen, that type of thing. So then, they used to have clashes. So then later on, come to find out, the level of my grandfather's high blood pressure, and my grandmother had thyroid, and my grandfather had diabetes. when you combine all of those things together with all of these issues, what happens? Like World War III on Earth. So, sometimes he would just flip. And it's like sometimes we don't look at that. We don't look at those sides. We don't look at people's stress levels. You know what I'm saying? We don't look at that, a mom may be so stressed out she's not sleeping. You know what I'm saying? She's tired. The baby just wants to feed all the time, and, the husband may want food and this and that. Or he may not look at the brother's 15 hours, working. He's stressed out, but he lost money on the stock market, this, that, so many different stresses. And so sometimes we don't look at that, we take each other to account, and we should stop for a second and analyze the whole situation of the person. Like, tell me what's going on in your life. And so now, like, even in some professionals, that's what they do. Like, they don't just look at face value. What's going on in your life? What are some other issues going on to help explain the behavior? We still have to be responsible. We can't just, Dr. Arif, I was stressed out at work, so I decided to hit my wife. To that level of irresponsibility, this society has gone to the opposite extreme. My parents, they beat me when I was young. I was molested when I was a kid. I lived in a bad neighborhood. It becomes a point of what? They lose the issue of the ability and capacity. You don't want to, that's the opposite extreme. At some point, we have to be responsible, but there are other factors that influence us and pressure us and this and that. But the issue of being forced is not just like pressures, right? Issue of being forced is actual, like, what? If you don't commit shirk, this sword is going on your neck, like what we saw with the Assad regime with some of the Muslims in Syria. You know what I'm saying? That's documented. They try to force them to commit shirk with Assad. That's the level of ikrah that they're saying. But we want to acknowledge also that there's levels of pressure that it can amount almost to that. Right? And so we have to acknowledge that.
Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, who said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took me by the shoulder and said, be in this world as though you are a stranger or a traveler or a wayfarer. And Ibn Umar used to say, in the evening, do not expect to live until the morning. In the morning, do not expect to live until the evening. Take advantage of your health before times of sickness, and take advantage of your life before your death.
Those were qualities that the Sahaba had, radiallahu anhum. They lived in the dunya like they were going to die tomorrow, so let's do what we can. Let's do what we can, right? And then, they worked like there's tomorrow. They worked hard like there's a tomorrow, like we have to prepare for tomorrow. Not necessarily the hereafter, but the dunya itself. So that keeps us balanced. Okay.
Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah, on the authority of Abu Muhammad Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-As radiallahu anhu, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, none of you truly believes until his desires are subservient to that which I have brought.
And the difficulty, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, here we go. Imam al-Nawawi is a genius in this regard. He's a person of ibadah and ilm. He was known for that. Imam al-Nawawi, he never married. He's devoted himself to serving the deen. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, the same thing. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah never married, but he was more active on the political front. Some of the ulama were like that. They didn't get married. They were preoccupied with the issue of knowledge and teaching and this and that. There was the famous muhaddith who died recently, Maulana Yunus Jambodi. He was at Mazahir al-Ulum in India. He never got married. He focused solely on serving Bukhari. He was the most knowledgeable scholar on the face of the earth in Saharanpur, in Sahih al-Bukhari. And so, some people say, Sheikh, why didn't you get married? He said, I'm married to Bukhari. And that was the fact. He taught Bukhari so many times, building students, making sure that people had an understanding. So there was that type of ulama, right? And so the issue of desire is where again, we mentioned this before. When you take out the word jihad from the thinking of the Muslims and you just equate it only to war, and then everything is, we don't want to get caught in that type of discussion because it's not the environment or will be considered as terror. You lose the sense. The political correctness is not right. You have to put things in their proper place. And if there's a problem, you mention there's an issue. But here, without the word jihad, we won't understand what this means. Because there's no doubt that implementing the deen, especially when it comes to making sure that our desire is in line with revelation, that's a struggle. That's a struggle. And so it's like Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah is ending the whole issue of intention and following the Sharia and the pillars of the deen and the abwab al-khair. There's so many things that you can do to get your reward with Allah, and intention and action, all of that. He's toning it down with the 41st hadith, with like, look, at the end of the day, the deen is about this activity, conforming to the will of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And that desire is the gate of the hellfire. What do we say about Jannah and Jahannam? That hadith is mentioned a lot of times in Ramadan. We mentioned that before.
Jannah is full of difficulties.
That Jannah surrounded by what?
Hardships.
By hardship. In other words, Jannah is like covered. Like the reality of Jannah is covered by hardship and so on and so forth. And Jahannam is desire. And so he's saying like that, our desire has to be fall in conformity. So let's finish with this one.
Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah, on the authority of Anas radiallahu anhu, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, Allah the Almighty has said, O son of Adam, as long as you invoke me and ask of me, I shall forgive you for what you have done, and I shall not mind. O son of Adam, were your sins to reach the clouds of the sky, and you then ask forgiveness from me, I would forgive you. O son of Adam, were you to come to me with sins nearly as great as the earth, and were you then to face me, ascribing no partner to me, I would bring you forgiveness nearly as great as it.
That's summarized already. We talked about that before. There's a lot to be said, but this is one of those hadith qudsis which emphasizes the forgiveness of Allah. So Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he leaves us with that opinion of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Right on. That good opinion, وَنُصَلِّ وَنُسَلِّمْ عَلَى الَّذِي أَرْسَلْتَ بِالْهُدَى وَالدِّينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُعْلِمَ النَّاسَ طَرِيقَهُ. So we completed the 40 hadith. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala allow us to practice and to benefit. So for those who participated, we have the ijazat. And the concept of the ijazah, first of all, what's stronger than the ijazah is the sama', is to hear the hadith directly. Right? Sometimes the ijazat are just given without even listening. But here, you have the connection of the sanad. The sanad is that you're being tied into a lineage of people who have studied the sunnah, and they go back, they're connected to people who have taken it directly from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which are the Sahaba. We know the deen came from Jibreel to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the Sahaba to the Tabi'een, Tabi'een, so on and so forth, till they came to us. And so it has always been the way of the Muslims that we take that knowledge like that from each other. And so this ijazah is an ijazah for the listening and studying, not just listening to the hadith, but also reflecting upon them, trying to study them, of the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. Right? And so it ties us back. And actually this is an interesting point, because this ijazah, and this was done intentionally. This ijazah, it says this document certifies that the Honorable Sayyid Barakatullah heard the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi from Imam Yusuf Rios, who was provided the permission to relate from Imam Daniel Abdullah Hernandez through an unbroken chain back to its author, Imam Abu Zakaria Yahya bin Sharaf al-Nawawi Damashqi. May Allah make it easy for the people of Sham. Yeah. But here, Imam Daniel Hernandez, we were together, and he was actually like my student, and he's my brother. He's part of the Association of the three Puerto Rican Imams. This is myself and another brother. But I actually intentionally, he went to go take the ijazah. We had this discussion about getting ijazat. So he went and he studied. And I intentionally asked him to do it so that I can take it from him. As my friend. In the knowledge of Hadith, they say that the knowledge is not complete till you study from those who are above you in knowledge and those who are below you in knowledge. There's any quality that comes from that. And so it's kind of interesting because, in the Latin American community, some of us, we have that tradition that goes back to Al-Andalus. Some of our people were forced outside of the deen with the fall of Al-Andalus. And so they were forced to change their religion. And then that continued for like 500 years. Islam was not allowed to exist in Latin America. There was suppression from the Catholic Church and the political authorities in Europe. And so now there's a revival. And so that's one of the reasons, one of the reasons of doing this is reconstructing the community back on Islam. So imagine, they force the people out of the deen of Al-Andalus, and then the people come back to the deen. Allah brings us all back. So we present this to Sayyid Barakatullah, and we ask for the continual study of the 40 Hadith. Don't think about it as a child's book, but it's one of those books that can teach us Aqidah, comprehensive understanding of Islam, and is a good way to. So we present, inshallah.
So say Barakatullah.
Yeah. You want to do it right here or?
Takbir. Takbir. Takbir.
Brother Sahib Muhammad. I don't know if you want to answer.
Takbir. Takbir. Takbir.
Barakallah fikum. Sama Hashmi. I'll bring it to you.
Takbir.
Allah.
Takbir.
Dr. Wasim Kagzi.
Takbir.
Allah. Yasmin Kagzi.
Takbir.
Zain Hussein. MashaAllah. Takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
Amr Afzal. So Amr is not here. This class would not be possible had it not been for Amr. He's behind the scenes, making sure everything here, from the tables to the marketing to everything, is through Amr. And Amr is our intern for the summer, mashallah. He's more than an intern. He's basically ILF right now. So Amr's not here, so we have this tradition in our culture, within our Jama'at, is that we praise each other when they're not present. And then we're very critical of each other when we're present. So I wanted to take a moment, inshallah. So Amr, inshallah ta'ala, Allah will reward him tremendously, inshallah. Allahu Akbar. So Abdurrahman ibn Ahmed Sayyid. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Takbir. Allahu Akbar. How old are you, young man? 11 years old. And you? 9. We have another young sister here. Where is it? She's outside. So we have, mashallah, children here. We have our elders here. It's a blessing for all of us, mashallah, to have that range within our class, mashallah. Ahmed Sayyid. Inshallah.
Takbir.
This one's for myself, inshallah. I'll steal that.
Takbir.
Allah. Thank you. Hamanaz Sheikh. Inshallah. Takbir.
Takbir. Allahu Akbar.
Just make sure I'm not giving you 2. Sometimes I'm giving you 2. You can sell it on the market. Mu'izuddin Rizwan. Mashallah.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar. This brother was taking hardcore notes, probably the best notes in the class. Maybe we need to get a copy of this. Munibuddin Rizwan, mashallah.
MashaAllah.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
Musa ibn Ahmed Sayyid, mashallah.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar. 9
Takbir.
years old. Sister Naziha Rios.
Takbir.
Imam Yusuf's daughter, mashallah, taking class from her father. A blessing, mashallah. Sister Sadia Yusuf. Mashallah.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar. Yusuf Khan. Mashallah.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar. Did we miss anyone? Saman, you don't count. I'm just kidding.
We miss Hamza.
Hamza.
We're
They're
gonna
no,
have
no,
extra
prison
one.
right here.
We're gonna have an extra one.
There, Saman has some people who are here. I know we have some people online who've been interacting with us online who
Yeah.
took it as well, like Sister Maryam Muhammad, who is one of the, she's the lead of the Sisters Committee for Islamic Learning Foundation. So she's also going to be our Arabic teacher for our upcoming Arabic class, level 1, which starts September 10th, inshallah, which will be every Tuesday, 2 hours a week, inshallah, for 6 months. It's a 28-week course. So Sister Maryam, she's going to be the instructor for that class, inshallah, coming up. So she also, inshallah, will probably get an ijazah at some point.
I have to say, this is the most diverse class I've had.
Really?
Yeah, as far as age, and families and teenagers and all of that. That's the most diverse.
Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing. Allah
We have to give our brother ijazah.
Inshallah.
Yeah,
Ijazah
Inshallah, we
when
have to get you. We have some ijazat, inshallah, for partial recitation, inshallah ta'ala. So make sure we get your name, inshallah.
Get the-
Sheikh Amr. Yes. No, we're done. Today this is our last class. So alhamdulillah. So this is why we're handing out the Monday through Thursday. Technically tonight is Friday.
And so, alhamdulillah, we end
So
this,
inshallah.
this portion of the
So
program.
the next class we have
with
is
the
going to be
students
Arabic
getting ijazah.
studies
We've been on
So
this
that's gonna
journey
be a
for
month-
a few
a weekly
days.
class
Inshallah, make dua for us.
for
May Allah
6
accept
months.
in
But we also
the
have
video
intention,
just for
inshallah, maybe having a
encouragement.
40 hadith, hadith
So,
Qudsi, as
people
Imam Yusuf
can,
talked about. And
take
there's a
benefit.
few other classes in
Inshallah,
the
Allah increase us
in
in
the
knowledge and practice.
in the plans.
Assalamu alaikum.
I encourage you the bookmarks we gave you, our books. Please visit our website, visit our Facebook pages, our social media pages. On the bookmark, if you scan it, it'll go to our social media pages. So that'll keep you abreast to some of our activities that are coming up in our classes, inshallah. So we look forward to seeing you all at our future events, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Allahu Akbar. Jazakumullah khairan. If anyone needs a bookmark, we have some extra, or if you need a book, we have extras in the back, inshallah. Take a bookmark, inshallah, pass it on, use it in your family, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. It's good to see you, alhamdulillah. It's a blessing to see you.
You honored us,
Yes.
inshallah.
It's free, yeah, the
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair, brother. Allah,
everything
this
is free.
is the setting that people sometimes, see the action.
Oh, yeah,
You know, we talk about law,
Yeah, keep in
it's
touch,
a
inshallah.
community.
We're hoping
It's
to
not
see
a
you more.
lecture,
Yeah, I saw
see
it today.
all of
I
it.
appreciate that.
guess you
He
are
probably
right
would practice.
No, I know, I
People
remember.
lost
I
it.
was in the shop, like,
Right.
We are very individual. We hear about love and all that. But we really live it. This is Allah. This is
So
it.
this center we've had for about a year
Mashallah.
now.
Wallahi, this is a great
Um,
thing. Inshallah. I wish it's spread
The
out.
Musalla was there for a while. What we
Oh,
did
you
is
hear
we
that,
took over
Salman?
responsibility of the center. It
Tell
used to be like a
Salman.
Oh,
business
this
up
is
here.
Salman.
And then the Musalla was kind of like the community
Put the pressure on him.
building. So we were able to take responsibility for the center and also create this space so that we can turn